think I'd ended up living in my dad's spare room, having been married and seemed from the outside of having a very happy kind of life, to living in my dad's spare room, drinking whiskey out of a bottle and taking cocaine on my own. And I think once I got to that point, I just thought, I can't do this anymore. And, feeling suicidal and everything else that came along with that. And I knew I had to change. I knew my life had to change, and I don't know, something came into my mind that actually I wanted to live. So yeah.
Who was around you at that time? Who was in your life, significant in your life at that moment?
I don't really know, because significant, I guess I had a group of people I used to drink with and a group of people I used to kind of hang out with, but I wouldn't say any of them were friends in that sense, because I couldn't really be friends with anybody at that point. I had associates, I guess you could say they were, and I had people in the industry that I was in at the time I used to kind of spend time with, but I wouldn't say I had any meaningful connections with anybody. My most meaningful connection at the time was with alcohol and consuming alcohol, and you know, that was all I kind of really cared about. Yeah.
So you were involved in alcohol and cocaine at that point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd been a hair drinking alcoholically, I guess, for the best part of 20 years, and abusing cocaine, again, probably for the best part of 20 years.
Wow. What do you think you were chasing? What were you looking for?
Just, I guess really, I spoke to someone about this, and they said, you kind of feel like you've got a hole in the soul and you're trying to fill it. And I think definitely that there's something so wrong that you're right, it is chasing. You're chasing something that you can never achieve. And the weird thing is, I think actually there's part of it is a physical thing. It's actually dopamine. When you're drinking and taking drugs, regularly, or all the time, whichever way you look at it, actually there's a thing that your body releases dopamine. Just the I'm off to go and purchase some drugs, just that moment, your body starts to release dopamine. It's like a level of excitement, and the first time you use them, you get that dopamine hit, and then after that you don't get anything. Then you're just taking it to finish it. You're taking it because then your body is physically craving it in a way, because you're now addicted to that substance. And it's the same with alcohol. How many times if I don't know if anyone sees this as, drunk, whether they drink moderately or whatever, the excitement of going to the pub, the excitement of taking a bottle out of the fridge, like, oh great, a drink, or someone coming round or whatever. There's that, and your body is releasing a chemical. But then some people are just chasing it forever into, essentially into their own hell, which is what I was living in. I was living in a form of hell. It's so painful. And that's the thing. I'd hope anyone that watches this, your life doesn't have to be like this.
What do you think people around you were seeing? Who was the Daniel that they were seeing during that moment?
A shell of a person, really, but I wasn't incredibly good at masking. So, I was thinking about this, over the week before, in preparation for this film. I think probably the first proper job I had, those people wouldn't have thought that I was drinking at all. And then I went for a very messy stage of being in one job where I was a complete mess the whole time for the best part of working there for 3 years. And after that, it was like, okay, I'm never going to get in that situation again in the workplace. And I reckon probably 11 or 12 years, maybe, I never drank at work. I never drank with colleagues after work. There was the odd Christmas event or whatever at work where, maybe I drank during that period. But if you asked any of those people over, probably from 2000 to 2012, if you asked any of those people if I drank or is this guy turning up for work hungover or any of that kind of stuff, they would have said no. And I worked in an industry where all you did was work. All you did was work. So in terms of socializing, I found people that were like me. So I socialized with people who drank like me and used drugs like me. So those people wouldn't, their opinion of me would just be, well, I was just like them. Whereas my family, the disappointment from my family was very obvious when I wouldn't show up to things, or I'd show up late, or I'd show up worse for wear, or I'd be ill, or whatever it was. That was very obvious. But your social circle gets very small. I had a whole load of school friends. Different groups of school friends, all different. I mixed in lots of different circles. I was very close to relatives and neighbours and all kinds of people. And then gradually, as the more and more, if they're not going to drink like you or use drugs like you, why would you hang out with them? It's a kind of waste of time. Who goes out for one drink? Who has a couple of drinks? What's a couple of drinks? I needed a couple of drinks. I needed a couple of drinks to feel normal. Once I had two, I'd be like, okay, I feel a bit better now. Whatever the edge was within me, a couple of drinks would take the edge off.
Were you in the city then? Were you living in the city?
I lived in London. I worked in W1. I worked in central London. Kind of Oxford Circus, and where Soho was like the place to work. And I worked in Soho, and that was where all the big companies. For my career, that's where all the big companies were, and so there was all the bars and the clubs and everything else. It could be absolute mayhem if you let it be. But so after a while, I kind of stayed away from it. I realised that, this is really dangerous for me. Yeah. So I kind of become very insular, and a lot of drinking and using at home. But also, I was in a relationship, and therefore it was a lot. We found neighbours and people that were kind of like us. And so when you hang around with them, you're just behaving like them. But it's not normal. It's not normal to leave the house at 1 o'clock, not come home till 11, having bought cocaine to consume in a pub, and then cocaine to consume when you get home. So rather than, I've had a really good day, let's go home, go to bed, like, no, it's 11 o'clock, the night's still young, have more cocaine and then more alcohol, and the more cocaine you take, the more you can drink. Yeah. So essentially you can, most people would say, go to the pub, and go, you drank 10 pints in the pub. You go, yeah, I drank 10 pints in the pub, and then I bought a case of lager and took it home with me and probably drank another 12 of those. Maybe more, and then woke up the next day and, threw up and then did it all over again.
Is it common, did you see it amongst other people, whether it was spoken of or not? Could you see the traits of it in others? Is it quite common? Yeah,
I think you look out people, sordid places and people that are like you. I think you twig, if you're someone who's really into the pub culture, or you're someone who really hangs around in bars, you become aware of people in there who go for one and then leave, and you're aware of the people that are in there all day, and eventually you end up they become kind of some sort of friendship, some sort of kind of bond with people who drink and act like you, and you just kind of hang out with them. And some people, you could, it's weird, I was saying this to somebody not that long ago. I remember having whole days of hanging out with a particular person who lived near me, spending all day in the pub with them, drinking, using cocaine, doing that sometimes every Saturday for like the year, and then for some reason you never speak to them again. And for, you've not had an argument or whatever, but maybe they've just thought, actually this isn't for me, this is a bit too wild for me. And so, but you know everything about them because all you do is just sit around chatting all day, getting hammered.
Do you remember a particular moment where you thought, I've got to change, like this is not what I want for my life?
Yeah. When I was 23, I joined a 12-step program. That was the first time I tried to get any help for what I considered to be really just drinking. And I turned up and at one of the meetings, and I got some help. And I guess the best part of like 9 months, I didn't drink and I didn't use any drugs for 9 months. That would have been the year 2000. I think I went through a very dark spell of problems. So it's the millennium, and I changed jobs. I got absolutely hammered for the whole of that. We rented a cottage down in Devon to celebrate, the millennium. And I was pretty much drinking from the moment I got up at 9 a.m. to the moment I kind of just passed out, midnight, 2 a.m. I did that for like 5 days. And there was a point I can't do this anymore. This is crazy. Why am I doing this? You know, I'd had a few friends die up until that, up to that point. I'd had a few friends die, you know, again, after consuming alcohol or drugs, you know, a couple of suicides, guys hanged themselves, guys died in car accidents, guys I, you know, spent a lot of time with, one I was really close to, went to school with, you know, he died in a car accident after being while drunk, you know, and some of those moments at that moment in time shook me up. And I'd had, like, you know, my first ever proper girlfriend. We broke up, and one of the things she cited is the fact that, you know, you're just hammered all the time, you behave like an idiot. Like, I want a grown up kind of relationship. And I was thinking, I don't know what that is. I don't know what a grown up relationship is. I didn't really have any role models around that kind of stuff. So I just thought people just went out and got hammered, and that was it. That was fun. And, you know, that's not what mature people want in their lives. So, you know, we broke up, and so I had that kind of moment where, okay, you know, I've switched jobs. There's been a few issues of me kind of like drinking after work and getting into trouble, broken up with a girlfriend, had you know, financial issues through kind of overspending and all that kind of stuff. And then we went away for what was supposed to be, you know, celebrating the millennium and having fun with my friends, and it was just me wasted the whole time. And I thought things had got to change, and so I joined a 12-step group. I went there for like 9 months and got some help, and didn't drink or use for 9 months.
But you went back to it in the timeline of things. That was a moment of pause.
I in classic style, I had a massive, I had a drug overdose, and I ended up in hospital. And as a result of that, I didn't believe I could do it. I thought, whatever these people are doing in these rooms to stay clean and sober, I just don't have it, and I didn't believe I could do it. Right. And then, you know, I started a relationship with somebody, and really then went into kind of like a binge drinking mode where I just get wasted every weekend, but wouldn't touch anything Monday to Friday. I'd kind of worked out through the 12-step recovery group that if I drank all the time, it was going to be really bad. So I basically white-knuckled it from Monday to Friday, didn't drink, didn't go out with anyone after work. And I did that for probably the best part of like 12 years until that relationship ended. But I would say I got wasted pretty much every weekend for the best part of 12 years, but not Monday to Friday, just like full on binge drinking. And, you know, that was I mean, the relationship ended in the end because I'd had, essentially had a mental health episode. I just completely, you know, I can't say anything else other than some kind of like mental health episode. And, essentially I just kind of ended that relationship. I just left and moved in with my dad, moved into my dad's spare room, and I was like, I can't live like this anymore. I can't drink anymore. I can't do drugs anymore. I've got to stop. But it took me 2 years of living with my dad before I then went back to 12-step recovery groups.
So that's the moment sort of everything started to change for you? Yeah.
I'd had this kind of on-off girlfriend who, there was something about her, and I'd seen this with various colleagues over the years where they were very different from everybody else in the group. And I couldn't put my finger on it other than the fact they appeared to be Christians. And they all seemed different from everybody else in the workplace. There was something about them, like you couldn't put your finger on it, but a couple of them had kind of made suggestions to me that maybe I wasn't happy, and maybe there was something that might be able to change that. Maybe it might be able to change me. Very delicately, they kind of dropped hints and stuff, and I kind of sort of took it on board, but didn't really do anything about it. And this girl, this sort of on-off girlfriend, she there was something about her that was very different from everyone else that I kind of met and hung around with. And when we were in a kind of off period of I know it was a few weeks or a few months, I can't really tell, my brain's very foggy around that, I contacted her and said, I've just joined a 12-step group. And she basically said, okay, well, I'm going to church on Sunday, do you want to come? And so I said, yeah, I'll go to church. And we went to church together, and service was amazing. And there was a guy up the front called Bill, and he'd basically been leading the service, and everything he said, I kind of hung on every word. And then the service ended, and I got up and I walked straight up to him, and I just said, hi Bill, I'm Daniel, I need you to baptise me. And he said, that's wonderful. I can't just baptise you. There's a process. You need to kind of do discipleship. And then he's saying, I've never seen you in this church before. I said, no, it's the first time in this church. And he said, well, why have you come here? And I said, I'm recovering alcoholic and drug addict, and I'm with my kind of on-off girlfriend, and yeah, she says we should. She said church is a good place for me to be, and I just, yeah, I found the whole experience overwhelming. Yeah, I mean let's kind of go back just a few steps. I came home from the pub one night when I was at my dad's. You know, this is a terrible thing. You know, my dad has allowed me to live in his home, and I'm not treating it very well because I'm, going out getting smashed. And essentially, I've spent all day in the pub from 11 till about 11. I bought a bottle of, I can't remember if it was a bottle of rum or a bottle of whiskey and some Coke. And I brought them home, and I said to him as I walked in, I think he was watching Match of the Day, and I said to him, Dad, can you take me to a 12-step meeting tomorrow? And he says, I think that's a really good idea. And so I said, okay, well, I'm going to get up in the morning. There's a meeting in this place. Can you drive me there? I didn't want to go on my own in case I bottled it. I didn't. So he picked me up and drove me there, and he drove me to the meeting, and he dropped me off. And he dropped me off at this church on the corner of this town, and there wasn't a meeting there. And I remember the meeting being there before when I went there 12 years before. And obviously I just thought, well, it's still going to be there, and they're just waiting for me to turn up because they really need me at this place. I'm going to do something for them, by being there. And yeah, the priest was there, and he said, no, there's no meeting here. So I was just sat really dejected at the bus stop, just along from the church, and I just thought, this is it. I've blown my chance. This is my chance to get well. And I thought, I know what's going to happen. I'm going to get on the bus, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go to the pub. I'm just going to carry on this nonsense. This is it for me. And then I looked over the road, and there's a Baptist church over the road. And there's a guy standing outside, this tall guy, and he's smoking a cigarette. And he looks at me, he clocked me, and I clocked him, and I thought, oh, what does that guy want? And he just walked over the road towards me. I was sat on the bench. He just walked over to me, and he said, hey, you all right? And I was like, yeah, I'm all right. He goes, what are you doing? I goes, I was waiting for some friends, and they didn't show up because I couldn't tell him the truth. And he said, he goes, are you looking for a 12-step meeting? I went, yeah. He goes, I've moved it to the church over the road. So he grabbed my sort of arm hand, and he walked me over, sat me down, got me a cup of tea, and that was me in that meeting. And wow. The incredible thing about that was he doesn't even go to that meeting. That's not a meeting he goes to. He lived 20 miles away, like High Wycombe, and essentially he'd been asked to do a night shift at cover as a security guard in a local shopping centre, and he did that, so he wasn't even supposed to be working. And he thought afterwards, okay, well, I'm not doing anything the rest of the day. We'll finish work in the morning, I'll go to that meeting. And so he was at that meeting by chance, if you believe it's chance, but I don't believe it was chance. I believe he was supposed to be there, and I believe he was supposed to take me into that room. And that was the start of my journey. And then, a couple of weeks later, then I'm in a church. And it was all so quick. I'd gone from, drinking whiskey and rum out of a bottle and sniffing cocaine off an encyclopedia to now I'm in a church. And church is very different from being in the pub. It was all a bit, older guys, middle class in their jumpers, very well spoken. It wasn't me at the time. I was probably had this kind of very geezerish element to me. And so, yeah. But yeah, it was all so quick. But I believe all these events, it was all one long build-up. Every person that had ever spoken to me and dropped a hint, it was like people were trying to direct me to this place, and I wasn't getting it. And so it just got harder and harder and harder to the point I was basically being shouted at. You need to give your life to Jesus, which I did do.
Wow. Tell us a little bit about that moment of surrender, I suppose. What did that look like when it happened?
It's beautiful. It's the most beautiful thing. When I'm sat in this room, I'm like, oh, this is like not where I really wanted to be, and I just started sobbing. And I know people often think, you know, the bright light and all that kind of stuff, but those moments do happen. And I've met so many people that have had these kind of experiences, whether they believe they've had a direct experience with God or they've had a direct experience with Jesus. I believe I was spoken to, and I believe I was told that everything was going to be okay. And that relief, I can't tell you that relief. It's like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, and then all of a sudden it's gone. But then you've got to deal with life. And life is a bit complicated, and the thing that you've used the whole time to numb pain, take away anxiety, remove stress, that's not there anymore. So now you need to pick up a different set of tools. And that can be, you know, challenging. But that's, you know, the 12-step recovery groups, you know, the program, I recommend them to anybody, and anyone that's got a problem and needs help. They help remove all these problems, you know. And I had a sponsor and all that kind of stuff. The sponsor I picked he was a Christian, and so that was very good. It was a very good person to have around me, and because we would not just talk about the 12 steps, we would talk about God, we would talk about Jesus, we would talk about being saved, and that was quite incredible. Not in those meetings, I might add. Those meetings we didn't talk about that stuff. They're very kind of, you know, agnostic, and no one wants to be, you know, have that kind of. People don't, you know, they're designed to be how they're designed to be. That anyone can go to them, and no one should be left out on, you know, race, religion, or any of that kind of stuff. So, you know, that's very important for those meetings. Yeah, they've got rules about that kind of stuff.
Cool. So tracking a bit of the chain of like change in you going on from this moment, where did you kind of see these changes in your life, in your mental health, in your heart, in your habits, in your relationships? What was going on?
The changes are some of them are very discreet and very small. Like it's really hard to answer, because some of them you don't even notice until other people say, you seem a lot more relaxed these days, and you look well. And, you know, I think when I stopped drinking and using, I was 11 stone. I mean, I don't know how much I weigh now. I was really, really skinny and sweaty and horrible. And so the first thing is the physical side of it. People say, oh, you look well. And just a general kind of like jitteriness and general kind of looking like you're carrying the weight on your shoulders, I guess that is kind of removed from you. And so people say, you know, there's something about you look different, but you feel more relaxed, and, you know, you're praying multiple times a day, and you're writing inventory, and you're trying to look at the things that, what have I done wrong today? Have I harmed anyone else in my behaviour? Have my actions harmed anyone else? So I guess that is kind of, people then notice that, and apologising for things as well. You know, saying, like, you know, I'm sorry, I remember snapping at someone once, and immediately said to him, hey man, I'm really sorry I snapped at you there. And he said, no, don't worry about it. I was like, no, I shouldn't have done that. You know, whereas before it was kind of a bit more kind of ego, macho driven, you know, so what? And actually now I do care about those things. I care a lot about investing in people as well, and helping them and supporting them in a way that I probably always felt that way, but actually now I do something about it. If that answers the question, maybe it doesn't, I don't know.
It does. What are you still learning?
All the time, learning all the time.
Examples, what are you learning?
The Bible is just this, the Bible's incredible. And this, you read something, you know, I'm a big fan of, David Guzik, you know, not a fanboy in that kind of sense, but I love how he breaks down sections of the Bible. And I love, you know, at the moment I go to a church that goes through the Bible line by line, and you learn things that you would never have learned about that. But also you learn a lot. I learn a lot about people, having patience and understanding other people. If you ask people, I've always asked questions of people because I kind of didn't really understand how people did things in life. But now I kind of ask people, like, how are you feeling about something? Whether it's a colleague or whether it's a friend, you know, I regularly check in with people to see how they're doing. You know, I've got a really wide range of friends, you know, different ethnicities, ages, you know, backgrounds. And so I'm constantly checking in with them. How are you feeling at this moment in time? What's going on in the world is pretty horrific right now, and it's been pretty horrific for a number of years. How are you feeling? You know, and that's something I probably never said. I was very much like, how you doing? And, people, and you go, it's men, isn't it? So, yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, how are you? I'm fine, mate. That's it. Never really scratched the surface. You know, not saying we should just spend our whole time talking about our feelings, because, you know, we have to perform actions and we have to do things other than just talk. But it's being there for people, you know. That is a great change. I don't know if I've really answered the question,
that's good,
because,
What do you think, just being honest, what remains a struggle for you?
The world remains a struggle because we're looking at it through a different lens.
Right.
And that is always going to be, for people of faith, that's always going to be a problem. Because people are always looking at, you know, if you're looking at politics, the Prime Minister, how the country's being run, it doesn't matter how you vote or whatever, that person is not looking at life through a lens like you. The Prime Minister isn't praying for things to get better. The Prime Minister, you know, he's looking at it, it's very much, he's got a job to do, and I'm not criticising him in any way, shape or form, but we are praying for the nation, we're praying for our leaders, we're praying for, you know, we're praying for our churches, we're praying for our kids, our grandkids, all of those things that we pray for. The people that are running the country tend not to. I know some of them may be, but they tend not to do the same thing. And I guess there's a kind of struggle there again in the workplace, when you're kind of saying, hey, look, you know, we've got a group of young people and I really want to support them and I think we should be going the extra mile. And you might not, you're looking at through, I want to be caring. How would I feel if that young person in the workplace was my child? How would I want them to be supported? What opportunities would I like them to have? And so you go the whole hog, you go as far as you can, you do as much as you can to help people. But there's always going to be other people that don't see the world and don't think you should be doing that. And I think that's always going to be a struggle. Sorry, it's always going to be a struggle with change. Everyone can accept change. Change is not always a bad thing. And I think if you understand that things are always moving and you work with people, you can get to the outcome you want. But not everyone goes through a process where they say, okay, I'm starting at A, I need to get to Z, and I've got to work my way through it. Not everyone works like that. Some people are kind of, I wouldn't say harsh is the correct word, but some people will just go, right, here's this thing, bang, chop it, and actually not be considerate of other people. And that is something I really struggle with. I think that we can be respectful and kind at all times to anyone. Even in the worst of circumstances, we can look after people. And I do struggle with that in the world where some people seem to be very callous and cruel and dismissive of people, especially someone that's struggling with an issue. And that is something that I struggle with because I think there's no need to treat people like this. Yeah.
You spoke at the start about kind of this hole in the soul that you felt. If someone's watching and really resonated with that first message, how would you give them hope through what you've experienced?
I filled that hole with Jesus and my church life. I recommend to anyone that is feeling that way, if you don't feel you're ready to do that, that's okay. But if you were struggling and there is a program that's appropriate for you, it could be maybe that hole, you're filling that hole with gambling, maybe drugs, maybe alcohol, or maybe none of those things. You might just feel like there is something missing in your life. And there may be something missing in that life. If it is, it's probably connection. You're probably missing connection either to other human beings or to a group. People have become more isolated over the last, especially since COVID. People have become more isolated. There's all the things that traditionally we would have done to kind of be connected with one another. Maybe they're missing now. Maybe there's no pubs or clubs or whatever you were into. Maybe that's not there anymore. But it could be that maybe you don't have a wider group of friends. Lots of people now in this country, people move around with their jobs or go study miles away, and maybe they don't have the connection. Maybe they don't have the friends, and so maybe it's that. And also, social media plays a very, it's a horrific thing at times. You've got men now with eating disorders, which was something that we didn't used to have, and that's not just social media. We've always had it, but you've now got men who struggle to find their place in society, and they're looking at these images of people on Instagram or whatever, and we're now finding all these problems. Ketamine, there's a ketamine crisis in this country right now. why are young people taking ketamine on their own? What are they trying to, what void are they trying to fill? And so, yeah, I guess it's a very kind of convoluted, nonsensical answer here, but yeah, if you feel like there is that, if you feel like there is that hole in your soul, if you feel like there is something missing in your life, chances are there is something missing. Like I say, if you can go to a church group, go to a 12-step group, or if that's not your thing, maybe just connect with some other human being on a level. You know, people need friends, humans need groups. I'm a firm believer in that. And yeah, I don't know whether that answers the question or not.
Just to land, how's life for you today?
My life's great. That very wonderful on-off girlfriend, we got married. Yeah, no, I got to kind of be a grown-up for a little while, and yeah, that aspect of my life is fantastic. You know, my wife encourages me. She's very pleased for me to be here talking to you, and she's been an inspiration for me. And I think, you know, some of the work she's done with women's groups and various study groups and everything else has inspired me. And so I picked up I always wanted to do the 52 Men of the Bible, CVM, plug for you, and hadn't done it. So we started doing that recently. So every 2 weeks we pick one of the 52 Men of the Bible, and we have an online group. And you know, I was concerned, oh, what am I going to do, you know, if only 2 people turn up? And only 2 people turned up. And do you know what? 90 minutes, it was brilliant. You know, every Saturday, me and my wife do an hour-long Bible study together, and then, you know, obviously we come to church on Sunday. So yeah, life is really good for me. I feel, you know, if you want to compare it to my old life, you know, I've got friends who I talk to on a regular basis, proper relationships, we have proper conversations. Some of them are going through some very difficult moments at this moment in time. It is still, as they're men, it's like blood out of a stone. You've really got to kind of push them and say, are you more than okay? You know, is it worse than okay? Are you slightly better than okay? And, you know, you just have to kind of push a little bit and break them down. But, you know, a couple of my friends are going through really the worst of times. And yeah, and some of them are, you know, just plodding along, going through life, and they're fine. But, you know, I have that connection, which I didn't have, meaningful connection. So yeah, I'm very happy for that. My job, you know, my job can be very challenging. But again, I have a great team I work with who I absolutely love and adore. And, you know, it's the best team I've ever worked with. And I'm very proud of the work that they do. And yeah, so, you know, all aspects of my life are going really well. You know, my relationship with my family, I see my family as much as I can. Not as much as my mum would tell you if she was here right now. She says she never sees me and I never speak to her. That's not true. But yeah, I try, you know, my mum's going for a scan today, and, you know, first thing I did this morning, I got up and I WhatsApped her and said, how are you doing? You know, I pray for you today, and, you know, my wife's praying for her today. We want to, hopefully she'll be okay, you know. So yeah, life's really good. You know, got my oldest stepdaughter, she's got 2 children. So come to this beautiful, fantastic church with my grandson, bring him here. He's going to get baptized soon, hopefully probably at Easter. So just, yeah, loads of just beautiful things kind of happening for me and my wife and family. Yeah, great.